Hi, my name is Margaret Whitman,
And my name is Gracie Northington.
and we are freshmen at Clark State Community College. Today we'll be exploring the black and white 1931 film version of Connecticut Yankee, which is based on Mark Twain's book, A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur Court, which he wrote and published in 1889.
So this movie is primarily about a man named Hank Martin. He is a radio salesman in 19th century England, and through a freak accident gets transported back to Camelot in the times of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. He was quite confused when he arrived, but he ended up getting a lot of information from a new friend who he named Clarence. His name wasn't actually Clarence. Some of the other main characters include King Arthur, his assistant Merlin, the king's daughter Alisande, and the king's sister Morgan Le Fay. Hank soon advances in rank and attempts to make 6th century Camelot into a 19th century New England.
This film was directed by David Butler, produced by Fox Film Corporation. Some of the main characters include Will Rogers, who plays Hank Martin, William Fernan, who plays King Arthur, Brandon Hurst, who plays Merlin, Frank Albertso, who plays Clarence. Alisande is portrayed by Maureen O'Sullivan, and Morgan Le Fay is portrayed by Maureen Long.
One thing that we both found incredibly difficult was finding an actual hard copy version of the film. It's extremely hard to find. We both searched our own libraries, our college libraries, and even tried to search Ohio Link. It took several days for both of us, and in the end, we had to get it off of Amazon, and we still didn't get the hard copy version. We had to stream it and buy it for $10.
So today we are going to be looking at some of the themes from the film, including plot development, actors and characters, favorite and least favorite scenes, the humor of it, and then later on we'll be comparing the movie and the book and looking at some of the strong points both of those have in the movie. So Gracie, what did you think about the plot?
Well, I thought there were some really positive things about the plot as well as some negative things. In the very beginning, I found it really confusing. Hank was going to an inventor's house. It was very stormy, and he met some really strange people along the way, including a girl who was running throughout the castle, a guy who was trying to chase her, and then a woman who was seeming to run after them as well. I was very confused.
I agree. I thought it was very confusing and rather creepy. They had a very dark setting to it, almost horror-like. It was raining really hard, the power didn't seem to be on, and the music was very almost frightening, and it just had a very negative, kind of scary vibe to it.
For sure. I feel like it really kind of took away from the plot in the beginning. It took away from the main point of the movie by making it seem scarier than it really was.
Very much so.
At the time, it seemed very confusing, but at the end, it really all tied back together. So at the time, I didn't really like it, but when it all tied back in together at the end,
it added some development to it
yes,
that you didn't get while you were watching it the first time.
Agreed.
When he first got to Camelot, what did you think about that interaction?
I really enjoyed how he first got to Camelot. So Hank was knocked out, and he woke up against a wall with a spear to his heart and a knight glaring down at him. And I found that really funny, honestly. I thought that was a really good way to start his experience in Camelot.
One thing I really appreciate about this film is that you get introduced to the characters right off the bat. So when he wakes up in Camelot, he is facing Sir Sagamore. And then right away, when he walks into the castle, he is introduced to Alisande and Clarence, and he starts to recognize them as the people we met back in the castle. So as confused as you were watching the beginning of the movie, you start to see that this is kind of influencing almost what's happening. So he sees these characters and he thinks he recognizes them, but they have no idea who he is.
Right. And he is continually asking them, haven't I seen you before? Didn't I see you back in Connecticut? And of course, they have absolutely no idea what he's saying.
Know what he's talking about.
So that was kind of a funny part. So, Margaret, was there anything that you didn't like about the plot development?
Yes, there was. So after he has his big revealing he's a magician, and he blots out the sun, and he becomes acquainted with the king, and he gets dubbed Sir Boss, there's this time hop And all of a sudden, he's in the castle, he's pretty high ranked, and you see all these inventions like the telephone and roller skates and just factories, and you don't know what happened. So you get the sense he hasn't been there for very long, but then it's 16th century, Camelot, and these things weren't invented, and all of a sudden they're all invented, and you're like, what happened? And I just think that was very confusing.
It was very much of a time jump. It went from one scene to the next, and I really feel like they should have inserted a couple more scenes in order to transition the audience. There was really no way for us to be transitioned into the next part of the film.
Yes.
So that was something that I think we both really didn't like, is that they seemed to fly extremely fast through the order of events. Yeah. And they could have taken a little bit more time to develop that plot a little bit more.
I definitely think so. I think they were trying to focus the theme. The book itself has a lot of different themes, and the movie seemed to be focusing on Arthur and Hank's relationship. But they tried to also incorporate how many inventions Hank introduced to them. But they skipped the part about him actually introducing them. They were just like, here's Hank, his relationship with the king, and then boom, we have all these inventions. And it kind of took away, I think, from that theme from the book. I really appreciated the rest of the movie, but one thing I really loved was the ending. I thought it was really cute.
I agree. They really used the characters in the beginning. They used the same characters in the beginning, the middle, and the ending, even though the time zone or the time periods were extremely different.
They kind of wrapped up what happened in the beginning and made sense of it all at the very end. Tied really well together.
So the next category we're going to be exploring is the actors and the characters. So first of all, since I read the book beforehand, I was slightly weirded out when I saw Hank Martin being played by a little bit of an older character in Will Rogers. The reason being, in the book, Hank and Sandy, as they call Alessandre, are in a relationship and end up getting married. However, they changed that part here in the movie.
Yeah. In the movie, Alessandre is King Arthur's daughter, so she's a little bit on the younger side, and she's actually in a relationship or a band relationship with Clarence. So they make Hank a little on the older side to appeal to Morgan Le Fay, King Arthur's sister.
Yes. So even though I found that slightly weird in the beginning, I eventually came around and really thought that Clarence and Alessandre had a really cute relationship.
I really also appreciated Will Rogers' portrayal of Hank. I think he had really incorporated the Yankee, the way he talked, the way they had him dressed, the way he kind of tried to interpret the Arthurian language, but still you could hear his Yankee leaking through, and it was,
yes,
I appreciated that about it.
It was very funny how he would try to sound like he was from that time period by adding eth or est or thouest into many of his sentences randomly. That was really a funny part of Hank, and Will Rogers really did a great job of playing the part of Hank Martin.
I agree with that. One character I kind of was turned off by and didn't really appreciate was Merlin. Although the actor did a very good job, Brian Hurst, of portraying him, they wrote him to be very sickly and almost pathetic. He reminded me a lot of Wormtongue, if you've ever seen Lord of the Rings, where he kind of whispers in the king's ear, and you just get a really negative portrayal of him.
It kind of ruined my picture of what Merlin used to look like.
One character I really, really liked is Clarence. At the beginning, he doesn't really seem like that big of a deal. He's just in love with the king's daughter, and unfortunately, he's only a page, but Hank kind of takes him under his wing, and he really blossoms, and I think it's a really good character development, and he's one of my favorite characters.
I agree. Clarence is very simple, but he has a lot of character in him. He responds really well to Hank, and they really balance each other out. Hank is extremely loud, and he has a lot of ideas, and Clarence just kind of goes along with everything. And I really enjoyed his character.
So the next segment we're going to look at is our favorite and least favorite scenes. For me, one of my favorite scenes is when Merlin challenged Hank to read King Arthur's or prophesy about King Arthur. And Hank, since he's from the future, knows what happens to England. So he spews all this stuff that really happens way down in England's line, but he relates it back to King Arthur, how he's, gonna be the bearer of a great nation, and one day that nation may fall, and they might lose America, although he doesn't say America because Arthur doesn't know what that is, but they may lose some of their colonies, and then he ends it by, and you will always make bad coffee, which I just thought that made the whole thing really funny, and I appreciated that scene a lot.
I appreciate that scene as well. It was really funny. One of the ones that I really enjoyed was the jousting scene. Hank and Sagamore had to joust each other in order to win the honor of saving the king's daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone was quite shocked when Hank came out. Well, Sagamore came out, he was all in his knightly armor, he had his long pole he was ready to knock Hank off of his horse with, and then Hank came out, and he looked very simple. He was sitting on his horse, no armor at all, and all he really had was a rope.
Mm-hmm.
And after escaping Sagamore for several seconds, he finally roped Sagamore off and was dragging him around the entire arena. And I just found that extremely funny, honestly. It was very surprising, but it was funny. And that was really one of my favorite parts of the whole movie.
Personally, I didn't really have any least favorite scenes. Again, referring back to the time hop, I didn't love how they skipped over that, and I would say that's probably, it's not really a scene, but that was my least favorite part of the movie.
I had one scene that I didn't particularly enjoy that I think they really could have expanded on more. It was the scene where the king and Hank get captured by the king's sister, Morgan Le Fay. I think they really could have intensified that just slightly. It wasn't as good of a scene as I think they could have made it. I think they kind of missed out on an opportunity there in order to make the movie have a bigger climax.
One scene I actually just thought of because Gracie mentioned her favorite scene that I really appreciated is when Hank finds out that Clarence is actually his great grandfather, Roger de Claremore, who he's been trying to find from the beginning, but no one can locate him. And when Clarence earns the honor to go rescue King Arthur's daughter, he dubs him Sir Roger de Claremore, and Hank has the revelation. He's very concerned about Clarence's well-being. If he slightly he sees his health declining in any way, he's all over him because it's important to him. So he even tells him, you can't get sick because if you get sick, it will be very bad for me. And it kind of has added a little more to the plot, a little plot twist there, and it's very amusing.
Yes, that was honestly one of the funniest parts of the movie. I would definitely agree.
Yeah. So now we're going to look a little bit at the book in light of the film. We know that films have its limitations and they can't incorporate everything, especially since Mark Twain's book has so many themes and it would take really a mini-series to incorporate everything. But we are going to focus a little bit on the book and some of the strong points of it, and then the strong points of the movie and what it really did well in regards to the book.
Yeah, so one of the really strong points about the book was it included a lot of details. You were really able to see a lot of what was happening. Now that can also be a weakness because it was, at least for me, it was really easy to get off track.
I agree with that. I think it dove a little too far into certain things, and then it would jump to the next thing and you wouldn't really know what would happen. He would jump from one invention to the next invention, one kind of character to the next character. It could get a little confusing to follow, and you would have to go back and sometimes reread to kind of follow completely.
Yes. So the movie really focused on taking just a couple of those themes from the book and really encompassing that into a very short film, honestly, compared to how long it would have been to make a movie with all of the themes included.
I really appreciated the length of the film. A lot of movies today are like 2.5 hours long, and this film was only about an hour and 25 minutes, and it really kept you entertained for that, and I think they did really well with that.
One of the other things that I really liked about the book and the movie both is their humor. I think they both did a really, really good job. Mark Twain is kind of known for his humor, and you can really see that play out both in the movie but especially in the book, especially with the character of Hank Martin.
I agree with that. He is just a very fun character to watch develop, from where he's very hesitant at the beginning of the book to where he's kind of ruling the kingdom in place of King Arthur at the end of the book and through everything. Even though sometimes he can come off a little arrogant and over the top, he keeps his humor throughout the entire thing, and I think that's a very steady consistency that is really fun to read.
Yes. I really think that the book did a great job to have a balance between humor and history, but also romance. And I think that that really shows Mark Twain's full life as he wrote this book. So is there anything about the book that you consider a weak point?
I do agree with you. I think that there's a lot of themes, and as fun as those are to read, it gets very confusing. I'm not sure if how Mark Twain tried to portray Hank Martin, but there are some times he comes off very mean and know-it-all, and he kind of is very self-entitled. He names himself the boss, and he tries to get people to do stuff because it's best for him, and that can come off a little off-putting, but I'm sure by writing that, Mark Twain had a reason.
I agree completely. And I think another thing that the book wasn't so strong on that the movie was is I found the book harder to tie in all the knots kind of at the end. Everything was still very tight. I didn't understand it. But whereas the movie, everything kind of fell into place. And I really appreciated that more about the movie than the book.
In the movie, you have a clear sense of he was knocked on the head in the beginning. He has a dream. You can see the people he just saw portrayed in the dream, and then he wakes up after being hit on the head. In the book, you were kind of left with what happens. He gets killed in the book, and he wakes up convinced that he really was there, that he mumbles the name of his child and his wife, and you're kind of left wondering what happened.
Right. It makes it more of a sad ending, whereas with the movie, they really made it more mysterious and kind of funny rather than leaving you with a sad feeling.
I agree with that. And I think maybe that is a little bit of a weak point in the book, is that after having such a humorous adventure, you're left with almost a bitter, melancholy taste in your mouth.
Right. So overall, I really enjoyed this movie. I think even though it was a 1931 version that's really old, I really enjoyed watching it. I especially enjoyed the humor of it. It was really fun to watch. And honestly, it just really enhanced the book for me.
I agree. I think it was a lot of fun. It really kept you entertained. I think the actors did a great job. I don't think there was a weak point for any of them quite as much. And I think because it focused on the theme of Arthur and Hank and Clarence, it really enhanced that part of the book for me. So again, this is Margaret Whitman.
And this is Gracie Northington.
Thank you so much for taking the time to watch our presentation.
And we highly recommend that you go watch this film for yourself.